As I continue with my research around COVID and the unusual patterns in terms of pathology, I was doing a routine scan of publications. And what I'm looking for is autopsy research because I know that if autopsies are done, the things that I'm predicting are going to be found. You may not realize this, but autopsies are not being done. All these people who are dying, where we don't have a good understanding of the pathology, it just doesn't seem right. When I say autopsies are not being done, they are not being published. There may be a difference. So it is possible that these autopsies are being done, but nobody wants to publish them. And so I search around for scraps of information. What that means is that I actually search for autopsy and case reports so that I can look at what they're finding because I know what I'm looking for. For anyone who has followed me for a while, I've been focused on autoimmunity, spike mediated autoimmunity. And I expect that this is what is going to be found. The only way you can hide this is if you don't publish autopsies, because if you publish them, I guarantee you, if it is occurring, it is going to be obvious. And so, as I said, I continue this routine search. Today, I did another one of these searches, and this is what I was looking at: spontaneous coronary artery dissection in a 64-year-old male. And again, this was recently published in 2025 because I specifically look for recent cases because I know that the patterns I'm looking for are going to be relatively recent. I'm going to go through that case and I'm going to connect it to another unusual pattern in terms of Embalmers clots. For those who don't understand in terms of Embalmers clots, this is an unusual pattern that has been occurring for quite a while. There is very little interest in it. And again, it's only going to be found at autopsy because embalmers are finding it in bodies. And so if you're not looking for it, you'll never see it. And this is the reality. And so I'm tying two things together because I know that they are actually quite relevant. So before I show you the paper, I'm going to be showing you the basic science as to what happens around these strange clots, and then why I think the two things may be connected. So this is an integration of scientific concepts. Before I start, as usual, I'll remind you this very important presentation on COVID's hidden time bomb, rapid arterial aging. The description, it's in the link, it's in the description. You can take a look at this course. It's discounted for you. Very, very important stuff. For some reason, the early part of that presentation has gotten almost 250,000 views in the past few days. So it must be interesting. So you should look at the full course if you want to understand everything that is going on. But let's get back to the science. Now, there may be some skeptics out there when I talk about these embalmers clots, and you go, well, what is that about? I haven't heard about it. It's real, and this is what it looks like. This is a picture of Richard Hirschman. He's an embalmer, one of the most outspoken ones. He has a 19-inch clot in a formalin tube here. It's all this white stuff here that was pulled out of a body a few years ago. And many embalmers across the world. We're not talking a one or two. We're talking almost, I think it was 70 or 80% of them are seeing these strange clots. Not necessarily as big, but white fibrous clots that are occurring. My initial thought was that this was only happening post-mortem, and it was something maybe that was occurring with regards to the bodies after it had died. That was quickly refuted by the fact that I had a whistleblower then show clots that he had found, well, not found, he worked in a cath lab and he shared images of some very strange clots pulled out of living people. Okay, and where you see the white bits, those are the same characteristics of the clot. It's mixed with some red, and this is from an inferior vena cava, a large vein. Really strange clots. So for anybody who doesn't believe it is happening, it is happening. It's just that nobody talks about it. Nobody investigates it. I have no idea why. It is probably one of the most unusual patterns in the pandemic. Nobody probably wants to think about the potential causes, but that's a different issue. So here is where I have an integration of about 2 or 3 pieces of science that I'm going to share with you. So the first thing you have to understand is to do with arteries. And I've got a picture here of the heart, and you can see these big arteries are going up to the neck and the head, into the arms. This here is the abdominal aorta going down to feed the legs. And it will have the renal artery going off to supply the kidneys and so on. So this is a very important artery. And the big arteries, like the aorta going down to the iliacs, are elastic arteries. Okay? Lots of elastic in them, and they take a lot of pressure. But as the arteries get smaller, and you can see, say, for instance, these arteries here, these become muscular arteries. And I'll explain the slight difference. It's going to be about the middle part, the tunica media. You will notice that in the big arteries, it has extra elastic and the muscle is bigger. In the slightly muscular arteries, you don't have any elastic in this part, but you have the elastic in purple on the inside, intima, and the outside, and then the muscle layer in the middle. And so this is the important bit that I'll be showing you in the context of what was happening. A more detailed explanation in terms of what the arteries look like is to do with this image from Gray's Anatomy. And what you can see here again is this yellow bit represents the elastic on the inside, on the intima, on the outside, and then you have the muscle in the middle. But what I want you to notice is these vasa vasorum. These are blood vessels on the outside of the arteries. And what they do is, because these arteries are so thick, they can't get enough nutrients from the inside, which oftentimes have little vessels on the inside. And so they are supplied by blood vessels on the outside. In the recent presentation about vascular aging, I was highlighting that I have now come to the conclusion that the inflammatory process is in this vicinity. And this is why we're having vascular aging. Now, this is important in this case, and this is why I want you to remember that bit about the outside, the vasa vasorum of these blood vessels. Really critical to understand. Before I show you the paper, there's another little bit of detail I need you to understand about the heart and what we call a myocardial infarction. Here is a heart attack. This is a heart, and you can see the blood vessels. This is the arch of the aorta, the big blood vessel that then goes down. And in blue represents the pulmonary vessels as well. These are carrying blood to and from the lungs. This is coming back. Now, this artery here is going to be quite relevant in the paper. That's why I'm highlighting this. And this is usually what causes a heart attack. An artery gets filled with plaque. The plaque then blocks our ribs and then blocks the blood vessel. And so this area of the heart doesn't have a blood supply and it can die. That's a myocardial infarction. And this is relevant in terms of the case. But what I want you to notice is that usually this is on the inside of the artery, in the intima, where it can then rupture and block the blood vessel. That's an important detail to be aware of. Now, with that in place, let's now go back to the case. So as I said, this case was spontaneous coronary artery dissection. And a dissection means that there is a tear in the muscle and the pressure of the blood goes into the muscle rather than through the whole artery. And you'll see in a second what I mean. First thing is that this is an autopsy study. He was 64 years old. Now, it was thought that he has spontaneous coronary artery dissection. That's where a clot forms in the artery without any associated plaque disease, trauma, or other causes. As I said, he was 64 years old. He had a history of hypertension, and that was the only thing that he had. His death occurred suddenly without any trauma. And importantly to know, he was working overtime at a construction site. So this is an actively working person in Korea, 64 years old, only history of hypertension, doing some overtime, and he died suddenly. So that's the essential background of the case. There are a few more things that I would like to highlight in this case, and they're relevant to what I will be saying with regards to what was going on with him. So as you go more into detail on the case report, I have highlighted a few things. He was a tiler. He was working on an apartment construction site. He had worked overtime the night before and was found dead the following morning at his workplace. So he was at his workplace. He died at his workplace. That's very important. As we said, he had high blood pressure and he was on medications for 4 years. No other medical history. Now, this bit here, recent complaints of back pain. Now, this is important because what I usually look for is these things usually don't just come out of the blue. And so this complaint of back pain is probably significant. The only other thing here that I wanted to highlight is that he had a big heart, 530 grams. Maybe it should be about 300 to 350 grams. So this was a big heart that could have been related to his high blood pressure. So it means that he had some underlying heart disease with regards to that. However, when they looked at the arteries in the heart, the descending the left anterior descending artery was grossly unremarkable. And so they didn't see anything too significant in the arteries to suggest that he had any plaque disease. However, when they looked carefully, he had a thrombus-like material of approximately 3 centimeters in length, which blocked this branch of the artery. So this is what caused him to die. And it's important, again, as I said, I'll take you back to the original picture here. That 3 centimeter clot was in this same left anterior descending artery blocking here. Now it's important, he had no plaque disease. That's what it said. No plaque disease was present, but there was a clot in this artery. That's what caused them to do some more detailed research on this case. So they then took a closer look at this clot. And what they realized is that it was not just a clot, but a clot with a dissection of the artery. Now, this is where it gets very important that I'm pulling a few things together. So when we think of a dissection, I'm thinking of what image to use to help you to understand that. When we think of a dissection, imagine this is the artery. This is a cut section of it. This is the intima, elastic on the inside. This is the purple is the elastic on the outside. This is the adventitial surface where you would have, in this case, some degree of vasa vasorum still present on the coronary arteries. This is the muscle layer. And so effectively what happened, this part ripped, blood was in it, and it then dissected along to form this clot. Okay? This is very important in the context of what I'm trying to explain. And what we look at is a few other things here with the paper. When they looked at the outside, okay, so the inside did show some fibromuscular hyperplasia. So there was a bit of thickening, but the main abnormality was this infiltration on the outside of lymphocytes, macrophages, eosinophils, all around the outside of the blood vessel. And it seems that this damage to the outside of the blood vessel is what then led to the dissection. Now, what you will see is, I'm going to show you now, this is a picture of the thrombus here in the blood vessels. And this is the bit here that you have to look at. Now, I'll try and see if I can explain. Again, remember, just consider that this whole bit is the outside of the artery. What's interesting is that this bit here is the true lumen of the artery. This is the false lumen because the dissected artery, now the blood is running in between the muscles rather than in the lumen of this artery. And this is then what puts pressure on this to block it. And then this forms a thick clot that's not easily digestible and then blocks the artery because of the inflammation that is existing on the outside here. And that's essentially the bit that I'm trying to explain. This is important because suddenly I realized when we think of the Embalmers clots, because we do angiograms all the time, and so if they were in the blood vessels, we should see them. And so it's not seen on routine angiograms, which happen every day. But what happens if these clots are forming outside the lumen, in the muscular layer, almost like a rip in the lining, a weakening and inflammation, and then these really abnormal, fibrous, almost non-elastic clots are then forming in that vicinity. And just for a reminder, this could then, this Embalmer's clot here, I am postulating that this is then forming just outside the lumen of the artery. And then this is what blocks the artery and eventually is taken out by the embalmer. And there is something very important, very strange about the whole thing. This is why, as I said, we have to try and work out the strategies as to what is going on. I'm just going to pull something back. I just wanted you to see another picture here. So just to remind you, as I said, this is the artery. I am saying that this inflammation here, like what they saw in the case, then damages the muscle layer, and it has an impact even on the inside. So it's the inflammation is outside in. There is then a rip in the muscle so that blood and blood products get inside the muscle instead of the lumen. Because there is pressure here, it closes down the lumen and you end up with a false lumen here. My thought is potentially this where these Embalmers clots, these unusual clots, are being formed, which can cause death or block major arteries and then have to be pulled out in order for people to survive. And it's this area here because they found that the elastic was intact in this case, the internal elastic, but this was damaged, and the muscle outside was damaged. As I said, this is me doing some postulation, and it's largely because they won't do the autopsies. If they did the autopsies and you just gave me the data, I don't want anybody's interpretation, because if you don't know what you're looking for, if you're not looking for spike-mediated autoimmunity, you will not see it. And so I just want tissue samples. Just do the autopsies, put them in front of me. I will analyze them and I will look for these patterns, because this is what needs to be done now. There are too many people dying. There are too many reasons we have to try and understand why so many people are sick and dying. I genuinely, I mean, when you come across anyone who gives you a narrative, just remind them that autopsies are not being done. It's the gold standard. That's how you know when something is really safe. If you are not doing autopsies, you're hoping that it's safe. That's my view. And so we still will continue to ask the questions. We will still continue to poke this bear until it is investigated, because that is the responsibility. There is no other way out. We just have to keep on asking those same questions all the time. Thank you for watching. I hope this was interesting, and have a good evening.